Book canon is not movie canon. Well, the real title of this video probably should be Book Canon and the movie adaptation of that book are two separate canons, but book canon is not movie canon sounds a bit more concise. Before I begin, I would like to make a few things clear. One, this video is not about the book canon or movie canon of something being better or worse than the other. Two, this is not a video where I will be heavily criticizing the errors in a book or a movie. I will use criticisms as examples throughout the video, but I will not go into extensive detail as to why a particular scene is flawed. If you would like to see something like that, there are plenty of other videos that cover that topic of conversation. 3. The goal of this video is to argue why book canon and the movie adaptation canon are not the same. Believe it or not, it is actually common for people to treat the books and their corresponding movie adaptations as though they were the same thing. There are many books that get adapted into movies, and you've probably heard of a few of them. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, Shawshank Redemption, Jurassic Park, and many, many more. Many of these movies have been praised for the way that they were able to adapt the book into a movie, while others have been heavily criticized for their less than satisfactory efforts in adapting the original source material. As an example, the Lord of the Rings trilogy has stood the test of time as one of cinema's best attempts at adapting the written word into the spoken word. Other movies, such as Shawshank Redemption, which is based on Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption by Stephen King, is very different from its original source material, but is still considered one of the greatest films ever made. So here we have two examples of successful movie adaptations, even though only one of them more closely resembles the original source material. But despite the success of both The Lord of the Rings and Shawshank Redemption as movies, you'll still find that many people who were fans of their book counterparts still believe that the books were and still are preferable to the movie versions. Oftentimes, you'll probably hear an argument from the people who prefer the books to say something that sounds like this. You should read the books. The books did X better, or the movies will never be better than the books. Now, I am not here to take away from any person's preference on what they like and don't like. Frankly, if you believe that the books are better or simply preferable to the movie adaptations, I will never disagree with you. You, me, we all have our preferences, and it is not up to me to tell you that a book or movie is more enjoyable for you. However, despite the book and the movie being two separate creations, you will sometimes find that some people prefer to treat the book and its movie adaptation as two parts of the same thing. You will often find that in the realm of book to movie adaptations, that there are some people who will point to a book as a reference if the movie did not cover a specific detail that is explained in the book. Recently, I created a YouTube short where I criticized a scene and a line from The Chamber of Secrets, and I was surprised to see that a couple people made the argument that the book somehow justified what was in the movie. You've probably heard an argument that sounds similar to this. It's explained in the books why X happened in the movies. After doing some research, I was surprised to discover that this is a commonly used argument. If someone were to ask me why a detail from an adapted movie isn't explained or doesn't make sense, it would be tempting to use the book as a resource to explain why something in the movie happened the way it did. One reason why it's so tempting is because not all the information from a book can appear in the movie adaptation. But there are obvious exceptions to this, like when a children's book is adapted into a feature-length movie. In specific instances like that, the book is generally much shorter than the movie. Another reason someone could be tempted to use the books as a resource to explain a flaw in the movie adaptation would be if that person simply disliked having their much-loved story criticized. After all, it's human nature to defend what you love. Now, here's the real important question. Should the book be used to explain why X happened or didn't happen in its movie adaptation? Someone might argue that it's okay to use the book to explain why something did or didn't happen in the movie because the information will make the movie more enjoyable or prevent criticism. Now, I will concede that there are specific situations in which a book can explain why something did or didn't happen in its movie adaptation, and that explanation can sometimes lead to its movie adaptation being more enjoyable. That's fair. I'm certain that many things could feel more enjoyable by doing that. But if that enjoyment comes at the cost of justifying an incoherent scene or story, then you might as well just believe anything you want, which is sadly what is happening with many modern movies. These days, it seems that a person's enjoyment of something supersedes any coherency with a scene or story, and that is not okay. Just because an explanation from a book can make the movie adaptation more enjoyable, it does not mean that it should. An explanation from a book cannot simply prevent anyone from criticizing the movie adaptation. The book is not an extension of the movie and cannot rescue the movie from its mistakes. The book and the movie are two separate creations completely unique unto themselves. It would be no different than me saying that a parent and that parent's child are the same just because the two of them are related. So, if you are using the book to explain something that happened in the movie adaptation because you want to prevent the movie from receiving criticism, that would be a misuse of the book. All art should be open to criticism, including books and their movie adaptations. No matter how much you like something, you have to be open to the possibility that what you like may contain flaws. If a movie adaptation contains a flaw, it does not guarantee that the book will contain the same flaw because they're completely different creations. Now, while we're on the topic of criticism, I want to talk about a common criticism that is brought up when talking about The Lord of the Rings. Maybe you've heard of it. Why didn't Frodo just use an eagle to bring the ring to Mordor? An interesting criticism. I am a fan of the Lord of the Rings books and the movies. I have read the books many times and watched the movies many times, and I have noticed that this criticism will sometimes come up when the books and movies are discussed. It may surprise you to learn that even though this is a highly debatable criticism, the answer to it is actually very simple, and that answer is, it depends. It depends on if that person mentioning the criticism is talking about the books or the movies. If the criticism is, why didn't Frodo just use an eagle to bring the ring to Mordor in the books, then the answer would be pretty simple because it is explained in the books.
"How far can you bear me?" I said to Guy. "Many leagues," said he, "but not to the ends of the earth. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens."
Now, whether or not you agree or disagree with this explanation, or you find it useful or useless, that is a separate discussion. For the purposes of this video, it will suffice to say that the book gives an explanation as to why Frodo cannot simply use an eagle to go to Mordor in the books. Now, let's change the criticism. Why didn't Frodo just use an eagle to bring the ring to Mordor in the movies? And unfortunately, there is no useful answer as to why the eagles are not considered a viable source of transportation. It is only implied. And an implication is not a very useful piece of evidence by itself. Implications can certainly be useful depending on the amount of them that there are, but in this particular case, the implications in the movies are minimal at best. This is exactly why it's important to separate the books from the movie adaptations and not treat the adaptations of the books as though they are the same thing. It would be a misuse of the books for me to say that the books explain why the eagles couldn't do that in the movies when the criticism applies to the movies directly. There is a term that is used quite often when discussing the authenticity or officially accepted material used in a book or movie, which is known as the canon. There are many definitions of canon. Some refer to holy text, while others refer to an accepted principle or rule. The canon that refers to artistic works will be the most useful definition in this case, and that definition would be defined as works of a particular author or artist that are recognized as genuine. For example, the Harry Potter books written by J.K. Rowling are recognized as genuine. One of the reasons for why that is because they were written by the same creator. If I had happened to write my own Harry Potter book and add it to the canon, it would be rejected and not recognized as part of the canonical Harry Potter books. But if it is true that the works of a particular author or artist are recognized as genuine, why do we consider them to be separate from the book canon when they are inspired and approved of by J.K. Rowling? There are multiple answers to why the book canon and movie canon are separate, and I will be using Harry Potter books and movies as an example throughout the rest of this video. Number 1. The movies, although inspired and approved by J.K. Rowling, are not directly created by her. 2. The movie adaptations cannot justify the errors of the books and vice versa. 3. Several pieces of information from the books are simply missing from the movies, which results in a lack of coherency. And 4. There is some information in the movie adaptations that are contradictory to the books. These 4 reasons stand out as answers as to why book canon and movie canon are not only separate creations from one another, but also that the book canon should not be used as a tool to justify the criticisms in the movie adaptation, and vice versa. Let's examine number 4 first. This one is probably the most straightforward. There is some information in the movie adaptations that are contradictory to the books. As an example, we could bring up something like Harry Potter's eye color, or Hermione's lack of buck teeth, or Ron's incorrect nose length. But the counter-argument to this would probably be to say, this contradictory information is a detail that is not important to the story. But that would be a very poor counter-argument, because it leaves us with a major issue. Let's pretend that someone just criticized the movie adaptations of the Harry Potter films, and I said that the books explain why X happened in the movies in response to their criticism. Because I am using the books to justify an inconsistency in the movies, it suggests that any flaw that happened in the movies are now invalid because the books can simply take precedence. If that same person were to then ask me, why aren't Harry's eyes green? And I replied by using the counter-argument saying that the detail wasn't important to the story, he could just reply to me by saying, you said that the books explain why X happens, so shouldn't his eyes be green according to the books? And this is the trap that people fall into when they try to use the books to justify something in the movies. You cannot have it both ways. Either the details are not important, or they are. If the details aren't important according to this counter-argument, then it would essentially mean that the canons are separate, and not every detail should be taken into consideration. If the details are important, then it would mean that the canons are just extensions of one another. So unfortunately, this counter-argument goes completely against the person who is trying to argue that there should not be 2 canons. Now, let's examine answer number 3. Several pieces of information from the books are simply missing from the movies, which results in a lack of coherency. A counter-argument to this claim would be to say that not all the information from the books needs to be in the movies. After all, you just previously stated that not all information from the books can generally make it into a movie, right? Wrong. That would be a valid counter-argument if the information that was missing did not result in an incoherent scene or story. But if we examine number 3 again, we need to remember in this situation, the information that is missing can make the scene or story incoherent. I recognize that this might start to sound a little confusing, so let me give an example. One piece of missing information from the movie adaptations is that Hagrid's bike once belonged to Sirius Black. This is a piece of information that is missing from the movies.
And where did you get that motorcycle?
Borrowed it, Professor Dumbledore, sir,
Said the giant, climbing carefully off the motorcycle as he spoke.
Young Sirius Black lent it to me.
However, because it is not a necessary piece of information that does not result in the scene or the story becoming incoherent, we do not need to concern ourselves with it. But I do want us to take a look at a few different pieces of missing information that does result in the movie adaptation becoming incoherent.
Very good. And don't forget to speak very, very clearly.
Diagonally.
In this scene, Harry mispronounces Diagon Alley. The movie is missing the explanation that the book provides.
He opened his mouth and immediately swallowed a lot of hot ash. Diagon Alley, he coughed.
Because this explanation is not included in the movie, it becomes confusing as to why he would mispronounce it. In this scene, Harry disarms Snape and he goes flying backward.
Expelliarmus!
It is confusing why this spell has the impact that it does. The movie is missing the explanation that the book provides.
Before Snape could take even one step toward him, he had raised his wand. "Expelliarmus!" he yelled, except that his wasn't the only voice that shouted. There was a blast. Harry looked around. Both Ron and Hermione had tried to disarm Snape at exactly the same moment.
And before someone says that this sort of thing happens in the movie previously, I would like to remind you that the movie is inconsistent when it comes to the Expelliarmus spell.
Come out and play!
In this scene, the dragon fiercely protects the golden egg, which does not belong to it. The movie is missing the explanation that the book provides.
He was speeding toward the ground as fast as he could go, toward the eggs, now unprotected by her clawed front legs.
It turns out that the golden egg was actually mixed in with the dragon's actual eggs, and the dragon mistook it for one of its own. In these examples, I want you to notice that I am not using the books here to justify the incoherent moments in the movies. I'm not criticizing the book in this instance. Because I am separating the book canon from the movie canon, I am able to criticize the movies themselves without having to criticize the book. If I were to use the books to justify these small incoherent moments in the movies, it wouldn't end there. We would then begin to justify anything incoherent just to prevent the movies from being criticized. Now, after all that, let's return to the 4 answers I gave you as to why book canon and movie canon are separate. I just examined number 4 and number 3, so let's move on to number 2. The movie adaptations cannot justify the errors of the books and vice versa. As I've stated before, one thing you will often hear from people who try to justify the flaws in a movie adaptation is this. It's explained in the books why X happened in the movies. This type of argument assumes that the books and movies are simply extensions of one another and not 2 separate canons. People who make this argument will sometimes, but not always, simultaneously use the books to justify the inconsistencies of the movie adaptations, but will also say that the 2 are completely different when the books did something worse than the movie adaptations. Very interesting, isn't it? If we take the exact same argument and reverse it, you'll notice that the standards change. It's explained in the movies why X happened in the books. A counter-argument could be, an adaptation can't improve upon something it is adapting from, but that simply isn't true. A book cannot provide an amazing score written by an excellent composer such as John Williams. The Harry Potter theme has become synonymous with the franchise and was not an original creation from the book. The movie was able to improve upon its source material in that regard. Remember, the people who do not want their franchise to be criticized are the specific people that I'm talking about in this example. According to the people saying the book explains why X happened in the movies, are making an argument for one universal canon. But for that argument to hold any water, it would also mean that the movies can also explain why X happened in the books. But you will hardly find someone making the argument that the movies explain what happened in the books, because people innately understand that the original source material is more official than the movie adaptation. So as much as some would like to treat the movies and the books as though they were synonymous, this is another example as to why the 2 canons are separate from one another and should not be used to justify the flaws in one another. With all that said, it's time to finally take a look at the first answer I gave as to why book canon and movie canon are separate. The movies, although inspired and approved by J.K. Rowling, are not directly created by her. A counter-argument to this would probably be to say it doesn't matter if the movie adaptation was not made directly by its original creator. What is important is that they approved of it. The problem with this type of argument is that there are many films approved by the original author that show no resemblance to the source material. So using that same film as a form of proof that a movie canon and book canon should be shared is problematic. So let's say, hypothetically, that a movie was not only approved of by the original writer, but also the script was written by them, it was directed by them, and produced by the original creator. Could we then consider the book and movie canon as a shared canon? The answer is, it depends. Based on this hypothetical scenario, we can assume that if J.K. Rowling had complete control over how the movie was made, then we could also assume, ideally, that the books and movies would not contradict one another, and any information missing would not be pivotal to the way the story is portrayed. And under a hypothetical scenario like that, it would be far more difficult to suggest that the book and movie canon were not a shared canon. However, in this hypothetical scenario, if J.K. Rowling did decide to completely change the details of her own book through the movie adaptation, then we would be back where we originally started, arguing if the book and its movie adaptation belong to the same canon. In the movie industry, there is never just one person who's in control. One or many people will write the script. Possibly one or more people will direct the film. One or more people will produce and edit it. It will star people who have been selected by one or more casting directors. One or more of the executive producers will fund the film and make requests of the directors and producers on many different aspects of the movie. When writing a book, the writer has complete freedom to do as they wish. A literary agent might ask that some small changes in the manuscript are made, but the freedom that a writer has is far greater than the crew has on a production of a movie. So, this hypothetical scenario is not a very rational one. Ultimately, when we are able to separate the book canon from the movie canon, we are able to appreciate and criticize them separately for different reasons. And although it's tempting to refer to the books when someone mentions a criticism towards the movie adaptation, it would not be helpful to simply refer them to the books. The best thing you can do in that situation is address the criticism using the information in the movie they are criticizing. If someone were to criticize the books, I would need to reply to that criticism using the information in the book. If someone were to criticize the information in the movie, I would need to reply to that criticism using the information from the movie. By doing this, we are able to have more productive conversations and produce arguments that are not only useful, but necessary for better understanding. And that is the standard that I think we should all hold ourselves to, if the goal of the conversation is a healthy debate. It may interest some of you to know that as I'm recording this, I'm sitting on top of my bed and it is 3:21 in the morning and I'm exhausted. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I've been working on this video for probably about a month, and that's also including time to write the script for it. Yeah, I was really motivated to make this because I've noticed that in so many places on the internet and just on YouTube in general, when people have discussions about these franchises like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, and I notice that people will often refer to the books when someone does have a specific grievance or criticism about the movies, and I just don't think that's helpful for debate. Anyway, hope you've all been well. If you liked the video and you want to see more from this channel, please subscribe if you're interested. I don't post often, but when I do eventually post, I always try to make it a really good video. I have a subscribe star that any of you are free to donate to if you want, but if not, that's totally fine. Okay, it's time to wrap up the video and get some sleep. Talk to you all later.
Shut up, Harry.